What was money like in your household?
So it's very funny because I grew up exceedingly privileged, like very, very privileged. So we had quite a bit of money. And then at some point, unfortunately, my father died and my mother went through a depressive state. And so we lost a lot of money. So I've had a lot of money. And
Give me a definition of a lot of money, like swimming pool, elevator in your house.
No elevator because I grew up on a farm, but you're talking about if you grow up in Europe and you have servants, you have money.
Yes.
Yes. So that's the type of life that we had. Like, I remember the first time I went to a friend's house and he was making his bed. I asked, "Oh, don't you have someone to do that?" So it was quite bad. Yeah, not
super,
spoiled.
yeah.
Yeah, but it was quite so. My parents inherited a lot of money from my great aunt, but my parents also did really well for themselves. My father was 3 types of engineers, so he did exceedingly well for himself. He worked on a lot of projects that are really big. There's a stadium in Germany called the Westfalen Stadium. It's the stadium for Borussia Dortmund. He was one of the lead engineers in basically making the construction for that. It's like one of the most beautiful stadiums out there. So he did make a lot of money. Yeah.
How did your folks end up in Europe?
My father got a scholarship and met my for the University of Berlin, and my mother basically was the parents were already in Europe, so like that's how they met. Yeah, so they met in university. They had my brother when they were in university. They went back to see my grandparents. My grandparents were not very pleased with that. They kicked them out.
Where were your grandparents at the time?
My grandparents were in a place called Wicklow in Northern Ireland. In Ireland. And then, so they went to live with my great aunt who lived in Northern Ireland. So
this is the one who eventually gave them...
Who gave my... Yeah.
Right.
She and my grandfather, so my mom's father, had an ongoing rivalry and differences. So just to spite her brother one last time, she left all the money to my father, who my grandfather hated.
Yeah. Okay, that's an interesting. That's like a whole interesting web, right? Okay, so you grew up very, very privileged.
I grew up exceedingly privileged. So that was very interesting. But at around 12, my father died, and so again, my mother went through a depressive state. And so there was a lot of decisions that she was making that were very financially unsound. So we lost a lot of money.
Do you know what any of those decisions were, for example?
Yeah, she was dating people who were literally there for the money. She was basically taking loans that were not sustainable or necessary because she already had a lot of money. There was a lot more going out than there was coming in. Yeah, so like a lot of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you begin to get conscious about the fact that this money is reducing or isn't there anymore?
Almost being homeless. Like I've
went from there to...
Yes, I've gone from like basically having
servants.
Like different, you have different places you can go, like houses. You're like, oh, we're going to this house for the summer and stuff, to basically living on the street. To literally, I've eaten out of trash, bruh.
Yeah. This is in Europe.
This is in Europe.
Yeah. Before we continue with this money story, allow me to talk to you about one of our sponsors for today's video, and that is Loop. And I bet if you're anything like me, there's always room for better financial discipline. And Loop is a partner to be able to help you get there. Using their standing order features, you can automate payments for your bills. That's electricity, water, internet, all of these utilities that you use on a weekly, daily basis that would allow you to be able to be better disciplined, to make sure you're not spending money that you don't need to be spending, and that you can have your next month covered. Loop is a perfect partner to help you achieve better financial discipline. So whether you're saving for a trip, whether you're buying a gadget, whatever the case is, you can set up all these separate goals on the Loop app and save actively towards them. And so why wait? Loop it and become a better financially disciplined person. So how do you reconcile, or at the time, how did you reconcile that life of saying you're eating out of trash, having multiple houses?
I think it was just... It's one of those very difficult things because it sort of messes up with you. But also, I'm very grateful for my brother. My brother is about 10 years older than me. I told you, like, my parents met while in university. So they basically had my brother before they got married. And that scared them so much. They didn't have any intercourse until like almost 10 years later. My brother is 9 years, 11 months, 24 days older than I am.
Yeah.
So my brother really tried. He was like, listen, this is where we are right now. And this is the reality that we are facing right now. And so there's two ways. You can either die or you can basically thrive. So you have to do what is necessary for you to do.
How did your mom make peace with it?
I don't think she ever did. Up until she died, I don't think she ever really did make peace with that. I think over the years is when I've recognized what was going on. And because she went through a super depressive state. Like, it was a really bad, you know how like everyone is always like, I'm depressed. No, I've seen real depression.
Yeah.
So I think she was just trying to cope, because this is the person she fell in love with. This is the person, like, they'd been together since they were almost like teenagers and stuff. And so losing that person was very difficult for her. So I think she was just trying to cope in her own way. Very unhealthily, but she was trying to cope. So I don't think she ever really, like, eventually we sort of like got okay-ish, because we basically just started living, like, I was working, my brother was working. Like, I think at some point it was just, we were very dispersed. Like, my brother was in a different part of the country, I was in a different part of the country. At that time, we didn't even know where our mother was, man. So it was very difficult, like, to try and get all of that together.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that must be... I can't even
I have lots of trauma, guys. Don't worry. You guys think I'm funny because I'm talented? No, this is all trauma, bro.
And I'm wondering, like, I mean, what's your lowest, I mean, during that period, what's your lowest memory around that time?
There's so many, man. There's so many. I think one of the lowest things that, bro, it's just, I think the reality of death, just being on the street and be like, I might die tonight. Like, I might freeze to death tonight. It's like, there's just so much that you realize how fleeting life is by being in a position that you're so compromised and so exposed. Like, I think that for me was always, and there's lots of those instances where you're like, am I going to die tonight? Even things like just food, just like, am I going to eat today? Like, is this a reality? Is this something that's going to be happening for me today? It makes you really question what humanity is. Yeah.
And at this time, what else are you doing? So, like, clearly you seem to be living on the streets with your brother to some degree. What else are you doing? What's your day like at that point?
I'm literally trying to stay in school. Still trying to stay in school. I'm very happy to say that I went through school. I paid through school, like, myself. I paid my school. My brother assisted at some point. Shout out to BC. He tried his best doing that. I'm living with him. Sometimes he's also struggling. But I'm in school. I'm working.
How old are you at this point?
I'm turning 13.
You're turning 13.
I'm turning 13. My dad died when I was 12, so I'm just turning 13.
Yeah.
So first job. So I'm trying to work through. It's illegal for me to work as an underage person, so I have to work under the table, get paid under the table.
So, like, you're living one of these Netflix movie series things that we see in one way.
People think it's very romantic and dramatic. It's not, bruh. It's one of those things. My very first job, I always tell people, I started working in a kitchen. I used to be a dishwasher. That was my very first job, and I'm so grateful. There's a guy called, his name is Chef Anthony. He came from Trinidad and Tobago. That guy literally just took me under his wing. I was so skinny. I was just so small. I was so... I was like, this is going to be really bad. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right now, from an adult perspective, when you look back, is, again, from, the heights that you were at to the lows that you were getting to, is it a slippery slope, or is it like one bad decision after another?
No, I think it's always... People always think, like...
It can't happen to them.
It can't happen to them. It takes one thing. It takes one thing because it takes one thing. It takes the death of a partner for then a mental, basically, illness to basically get triggered. And then just that goes away. It's one decision. Like, my brother and I always, whenever we sit down, like, we're always like, it's amazing we didn't turn to a life of crime. It's just amazing, like, we didn't turn to a life of crime. But also, you learn that human beings are extremely fickle, because the people that you think would be there for you, friends, family, that sort of thing, bro, people just melt away, man. They're not there. So it's and I look at, for example, I look at Kenya and I look at the Kenyan middle class. The Kenyan middle class is a fallacy. It's one disaster away from poverty.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about like, I'm talking about abject poverty, like literally nothing. So it's always I say we need to understand how fortunate we are as whichever position we are in, because it takes one thing. It just takes one. It's one afternoon you come home and they're like, oh, your dad's dead. And that's when everything
life,
just changes immediately.
Completely.
Yeah.
Gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good lesson. So what happens next? I mean, what's the next phase of your life? I assume you get through school.
I get through school. So one of the other lows of my life, this was an interesting day. I did quite okay in school, but then I didn't go for my graduation ceremony. I couldn't afford the gowns. I couldn't afford any of that stuff. Like, you have to pay all this stuff to be there, get called. So I'm working at my third job, but this time I'm a bit older. I'm working at my third job, and this guy with his family come in, and they came from the same school we were in, and whatever says, oh, you see that dude over there? This is now what I think. I don't know if he said this. Like, that dude is in the same school, and this guy just graduated magna cum laude. And the dad calls me over, because I'm serving at that point. I'm a waiter at this point. Calls me over and says, oh, my son says you graduated magna cum laude. Like, did you have a party? I was like, no. And he was like, okay, cool. Like, why don't you have a slice of his cake? And they cut a slice for me, and they give it to me on a plate. And I go to the back of the restaurant. I give it to basically one of the chefs. This is not the chef that I know. This is some other place. And they put it for me in the fridge. And then during my break, I go outside. I sit next to the trash. And I couldn't eat. It was just the most. I felt like trash. I just felt like shit, bro. So I just took that and I threw it in the trash, and then I went back to work.
And you're like, forget.
I was just like, life is so unfair.
Yeah.
Yeah.